there is a need for us in dealing with something like the military in a war that is so clearly unjust, as the Vietnam War was profoundly unjust, and as the Iraq War is profoundly unjust. There is a need to not pass a judgment on the men and women serving in the military. They are trapped. If one is a Marxist, one can see clearly that people are trapped by circumstances, even including those who lead the army. They're also trapped by their roles, and it's very hard to reach them, but particularly the troops who are not well educated. In many cases, who are very patriotic. In the case of the Vietnam War, the guys that we gave shelter to were very often men who had volunteered to serve in Vietnam because they believed in the cause. It was when they got to Vietnam and found they were shooting women and children that they turned against the war. But they had believed in the lies sold to them and had gone there willingly. In the case of Iraq, you had an indefensible regime of Saddam Hussein. And I must say there's one slight difference between the Iraq and the Vietnam situation. In the Vietnam situation, whatever one thinks about the politics of Hanoi, and by and large I'm on the side of Hanoi in that war, but whatever one thinks about those politics, the Vietnamese people were unified with few exceptions in supporting Ho Chi Minh. And this was a movement which did not murder their own civilians, did not drill holes in the heads of people, and did not engage in the kind of mass killing that we see in Iraq. And had the Americans been willing at any time to leave, we would have been able to turn the country over to an organized opposition, which in fact happened when we were militarily defeated and had to airlift our embassy staff from the embassy in Saigon in 1975. I was delighted to go back to Saigon in 1981 and to look at the American embassy, which was at that time deserted, but had become liberated territory. In the case of Iraq, it's much more tragic because of the conflicts and the violence and the murderous nature of much of the opposition to the U.S. is also opposing its own people. But our job is to reach out to the men and women in the military to make it clear that we are not going to stand in judgment. We're not in a position to do that. We want to be able to help them in any way we can. And the veterans who have come out of that conflict, either the Iraq conflict or the Vietnam conflict, have been through horrors of which we really cannot easily imagine. One of the reasons I was very bitter about the role of the Revolutionary Communist Party after the Vietnam War was that they politicized the struggle of the veterans and tried to make it anti-imperialist. The veterans needed more than anything else to be able to talk and deal with other veterans, not with me, but with each other. They were dealing with mental illness, with alcoholism, with drug addiction, with wives who had left them. They were dealing with the horror of the war, things I would never understand, and things that no one here, unless you were a veteran, would really guess at. They needed each other, and the effort to politicize this was really a great mistake. And our job in dealing with the veterans from Iraq, while it's fine if they want to talk politics to us, and that's good, it is very wrong for us to try to impose a political structure on that resistance. They need our help and our support. They have been victims of a crime, as have the people in Iraq been victims of a crime. And what is very exciting to me is the fact that there is a Winter Soldier hearing taking place in Washington today, that the Iraqi veterans are going through the same process that the Iraq veterans, the Vietnam veterans went through, being politicized by their experience, which is a painful process. One of those guys interviewed on television that I saw last night had supported the war, had thought overthrowing Saddam was a good thing, and had gone in cheerful about that, and then found himself trapped, and I was watching this on TV, trapped in waterboarding, trapped in the killing of civilians, and he didn't end up a supporter of Saddam, he ended up an opponent of the American war. So I think this is one of the really important fronts in the struggle against the war in Vietnam. And I have one last thing to say. 10 minutes and 17 seconds, I'm sorry. I am very, very bitter about the deliberate and effective media effort to talk about veterans from Vietnam who've been spit on. This is a categorical lie. I will be prepared to give money if you can find a veteran who can testify that anybody from the American Peace Movement was spit on. We aided and supported. The War We Sisters League was one of the groups which worked very closely with the Vietnam veterans every step of the way. And why we ever allowed the media to sell us this myth that we who opposed the war spit on the men who were also victims, I don't know. We must not at any point treat the veterans in the Iraq conflict as if they were the criminals. They are victims as much as any of the troops, as any of the people in Iraq. We need to reach out to them, to support them, to make it clear that they have in us a base of support, and not allow once more the lie that we spit on our troops. We urge them to desert. We urge them to oppose the resistance. We want to work with them in any way we can, and thank God for the Winter Soldiers, which we didn't organize. The Winter Soldier hearing being held in Washington today is being organized by the Iraqi veterans, not by the American political left, and thank God for them.